President Biden continuing to undo many of the Trump administration's harshest immigration policies. Even though we're dealing with a surge at the southern border with more than 100,000 migrants detained just last month alone, that's the highest monthly total since the summer of 2019, this administration's handling things far different than the Trump folks did. Washington Post editorial page did what I felt was a good job of describing the differences, so let me now quote from that piece. As the numbers of undocumented families, lone teenagers, and even younger children apprehended at the border climb, Homeland Security officials, they're shifting gears by preparing to transform detention centers into short-term way stations from which families will be swiftly screened, tested for COVID, and then allowed to join relatives already in the States. That is a humane and different approach, it goes on to say, that would minimize the harm inflicted on minors. President Trump regarded trauma in the form of breaking up families as a fine tool of dissuasion when it came to illegal immigration. Mr. Biden, to his credit, is charting a different path. And in the meantime, President Biden has set up a task force to reunite all the families that were split up because at the time he took office, more than 600 kids we know of were still without parents. So far, at least 100 families have been reunited, so obviously still a long ways to go. I want to bring in my guest right now, Lee Gelernt. He is the Deputy Director of the ACLU's Immigrants Rights Project. He's been at the forefront of the effort to locate the parents who had the kids taken away. He's also the lead attorney suing the government. And Lee, let me first get from your perspective, are you cautiously optimistic or are you completely confident that the right thing's going to be done for all the separated families? I know from the ruling of the judge, there was still a little bit of a fudge room here that it was a recommendation or a mandate.
I would say we're cautiously optimistic. You know, I think the Biden administration wants to do the right thing, has committed to doing the right thing. We hope that they're going to do it quickly and they're going to follow through and that there's not going to be some initial burst and then they're going to fall down on it, because this is for the long haul. I think we're talking about more than 5,500 families that have been separated. There's going to need to be a real sustained commitment. We haven't seen any action from them yet. So, I can't be anything more than just cautiously optimistic, but I hope we see something soon. If we don't see something soon, I think we're going to become very, very concerned and really push back very hard.
Lee, has it still been dumped on your guys' lap in that it took you and I know others' efforts to point out what the previous administration was doing, and only then, when they were in effect caught, did they say, yeah, fine, we did it, not our problem, and then you had to both find the populations that were impacted, at least the names, then you have to go out and find all the separated families. Are you confident now that at least you know which families were displaced? And are you getting help at least in terms of locating where they are before you even begin the reunification process?
So I think at this point, having been litigating this for 3 years, I don't want to say that we are confident that we know about every separated family, because there have been too many surprises over the 3 years. I am hoping that if any families haven't been brought to our attention, the Biden administration will figure that out. And they have already reached out to us to compare notes about what families we know have been separated. But it's still up to us to locate the families. We hope the Biden administration will give us help. We'll continue to look through databases for additional phone numbers and addresses. But unfortunately, there's no silver bullet to fix what the Trump administration did in locating the families. What we do hope is that the Biden administration will focus on what only the government can do, and that's giving permission to the parents to return to the United States to see their children again, giving them status here and giving them restitution. We will continue to try and find the families, but the Biden administration needs to begin bringing the families back to the U.S. who we have found. I think a lot of people don't realize that not only have we not found 500 families, but there are hundreds of other families who we have found, have been in contact with for years, but remain separated from their children because the Trump administration would not allow them to reunite here in the United States. So we'd like there to be parallel tracks while we continue to find the remaining families. We'd like the Biden administration to begin bringing back families to the U.S.
And Lee, strip away the legalese for a minute, and I'm sure there's people watching at home who are saying, you know, why they let the kids come over here. They're trying to find a shortcut to come to this country. If anybody spent one day listening to the families, do you think there'd be a lot of changed hearts and minds in terms of what's the right thing to do here? This isn't a jump ball, is it?
No, I think you're right. I think there's a couple of things. One is that there's this misconception that families want to pick up with their young children, travel thousands of miles on a dangerous journey, and come to a strange place, leave their home and culture. It's just not true. People leave because they have to leave. You know, and when I talk to families who came here and they had their children taken away, and I asked them, would you have come anyway if you had known your child was going to be taken? And they just shrugged and said, well, what choice did I have? I couldn't stay there and allow my child to be killed. And I think if people could have seen what happened with these little children, 2 or 3 years old, begging and screaming, please don't take me away from my mommy or daddy, I think this would have ended sooner if there could have been cameras there. You know, the Trump administration tried to dehumanize this whole population, making it seem like they're just trying to come and take advantage of us, or they're criminals, or they're members of gangs. If people could see for themselves who these families are with these little children and the danger they've left and the trauma they've experienced, I suspect people would have a different view. You know, right now there's just this abstraction of all these numbers, but people really need to think about these families and see them as human beings. And I hope we can do that.
And just one more. Our government did this. This wasn't a couple rogue guys at the border who decided to take things in their own hands and make up policy on the fly. This was an intentional act by the U.S. government to traumatize kids and their parents. The current administration had nothing to do with this, but they have an opportunity to write a national disgrace. I mean, isn't that the way we ought to look at this?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this is a national disgrace. It's a historic disgrace. You know, I've said many times that this is the worst thing I've ever seen in 30 years doing this work. And this is one of those things that's going to go down in history as just shameful. The United States government deliberately engaged in child abuse. And that's what the American Academy of Pediatrics says. It was straight out child abuse, the trauma we inflicted on these children. And so the Biden administration didn't do this. But I think, as you put it, has an opportunity to fix it, and I think they need to fix it quickly.
And are you getting the help finally that you need, that you're not working in opposition with your own government? Is the new administration helping you make these reunifications possible?
So far, we've talked to them. They haven't engaged in any reunification. So I think when you asked me in the beginning, you know, am I confident or cautiously optimistic? Right now, I'm just going to be cautiously optimistic, because I can't say I'm confident it's going to happen because it hasn't happened yet. We are still waiting for those first reunifications. So we'll wait and see. But at some point, we will begin to push back very hard. The Biden administration wants to do the right thing, says they want to do the right thing. But at some point, we need to see action.
All right. Lee, as always, keep up the good fight. Thank you for keeping us in the loop.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, now some top Democrats in New York, they're calling for Cuomo to step down over the abuse allegations. After the break, I'm going to show you how the governor is responding and also what are his chances of sticking it out.